Give up a round of applause for the current candidates for the Petaluma City Council. Do we have enough mics up here?
We have one mic.
One mic. So you'll be passing it around. All right. So if we could, grab the mic, somebody, and please introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi everybody, good evening. Alicia K. Harris, and I am running for Petaluma City Council.
My name is Gabe Kearney. I'm a Petaluma City Council member. I'm running for a 4-year term.
Good evening. My name is Tiffany Renee, Vice Mayor of Petaluma City Council. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hi, I'm Jason Davies. I'm Chair of the Technology Advisory Committee and candidate for City Council. Thanks.
All right, folks, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. One candidate, Ms. Miller, could not make it because of scheduling a problem, I'm told. Another candidate, Mike Healy, who has been on the City Council for a long time, refused to attend this debate tonight. I will say that I've been trying to get him on my radio show for 4 years and he refuses to come on. He's the only member of any council or board of supervisors or anyone in the county who has refused for 4 years to come on my show. I don't know the man, I know nothing about him. I don't even live in Petaluma. I just find it curious. All right, that said, I do have some questions here. And again, I don't live in Petaluma, but I've done my due diligence and my homework, and we have the candidates, especially the current members of the City Council on our radio show all the time, including Mayor David Glass. Let me just start with this. The finances in the state of California are horrendous. We all know this. The budget problems have gone on and on for quite a while. The local governments have suffered before the state made some changes to try and get the state budget together that also made local governments suffer more. But given the state of the finances, let's say in Petaluma, let me ask the candidates two things. How would you raise revenues for Petaluma while balancing, and this is important, balancing the quality of life in this fine town? Let's begin, if you would, pass it down to Gabe Kearney.
So do I get a half hour to talk? What are the rules?
Yeah, I'll be down the street. Call me when you're done.
I thought that was a legitimate question. How much time do we have to talk?
I don't know. I said there's no rules. I'm making it up.
Okay.
Well, I don't have all night, so neither do these people.
All right. So since I've been on the council, which has been since March of 2011, we have taken actions here in the city of Petaluma to help businesses come to town and to expand. And we've made it a more friendly environment for businesses to thrive in the community of Petaluma. The first thing we did was to lower the linkage fees. As soon as we did that, we saw 3 large businesses move to Petaluma and increase the amount of employees working in the city of Petaluma greatly. When those businesses moved to town, they moved into some of the business parks, and that helped all of the businesses in the area that provide lunch, gas stations, etc. That helps bring revenue into the city of Petaluma because we get the sales tax revenue, from that. Another action that we've done to help businesses is to lower the impact fees. We just did that about a month ago, and when we lower the impact fees, that makes it so the fees that they're paying are more accurate with the current needs of the city and better reflect the projects that are on the list or in the pipeline that we need to work on. Lowering those fees by 23% will make it easier for businesses to afford to move to Petaluma, and when they do that, they bring jobs to our community. That is how we are going to help to increase the revenue and make sure that this community keeps going forward in a positive direction. Thank you.
When I think about raising revenues, I think about the wonderful community we have and how do we maintain that quality of life. And for me, when we talk about bringing revenues to the city, I'm thinking about a sustainable practice, and that means opportunities in the high-tech sectors and opportunities in healthcare and building our tourism, because in terms of job growth, we want businesses that offer head of household wages, and by default, generally offers healthcare benefits. And it allows people affordable home ownership. And what do? They reroute right back in our community, and it all becomes very, very circular in its motion. And then as we talk about tourism, we have to, again, maintain what we have here in Petaluma with integrity and grow it in a way that we continue to get to value what we have, but we keep bringing people to our community, and the way to do that is to boost our tourism and provide people with places to stay so that we can just continue to engage that revenue stream.
Thank you. The last 4 years that I have been on the Petaluma City Council, I've had the opportunity to serve at the regional level on a few different boards and commissions that directly bring money to the city and to the region in terms of projects. I've been very focused in my priority in making sure that we continue to have funding for the 101 widening, our interchange projects in Petaluma, as well as transit monies for the Golden Gate bus service. And through my roles in those regional bodies, I've been able to steer over $300 million into the Petaluma region. And my priority is to continue to focus on the 101 widening so that we can connect with Novato and that we can bring that trail that goes up from Novato to Petaluma. This is one area where we can really expand our tourism through bicycling and recreation. And it's very important also for commuters and being able to reduce cars on the freeway. In terms of quality of life, I think this is a direct impact to our quality of life that we haven't had the focus on the widening starting at the southern part of the county, but it instead has happened in the northern part of the county, and that's really impacted Petaluma in terms of its congestion and the air quality issues that we've had to face, as well as the numerous accidents that continue to happen on the freeway and drain our public services. So being able to focus on the widening is bringing about 1,500 jobs to the region, and in order to really spur economic development, we need to have job creation, and this is one way that I know that we can do that and that I've been focused in. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I support many of the measures that the council has been working on in terms of lowering fees for business. I've been in business for about 20 years in the technology industry. It's an area identified by our economic strategic plan as a primary opportunity for growth that gets us the high-paying jobs that we need, that gives money back into our city services. In addition to that, I've got a background in marketing, sales, and business development at a time when we need to be attracting more business to town. It's great to lower fees. That's a great way to keep businesses here that want to expand. We want to make that easy for the right types of businesses to do. At the same time, we need to have an aggressive marketing program, and I am actually the only one who has the kind of experience in marketing that's needed at a time when we need to be attracting more businesses. Now, we had a great opportunity with the Little League. That was incredible free marketing. We need to build on that. I've been currently working with Ingrid Alverde, who's our economic development manager, to consult with her on some marketing programs to attract some businesses, actually from San Francisco, for example, in the Silicon Valley. We have an incredible quality of life here. The company that I originally worked at when I started here in Petaluma back in 2000 came up here largely because, for one, the cost was lower. The rents were very much lower, but also the quality of life. We need to make sure that as we're developing, we retain that quality of life because that's the very attractive force that brings people here. So there's a way to have a balance, and with my background in business as well as policy and planning, I was a graduate of UCSC in politics with environmental studies and emphasis on planning and policy. These are the kind of experiences that we need to have on the council. They're sorely needed, and I'm prepared to offer that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all. For years, Petaluma, it's been a while, Petaluma struggled with issues that we see throughout local governments here in the North Bay. We see it in Santa Rosa. We have seen it in Santa Rosa for a number of years now. Most of these issues have fractured local politics along two lines, generally, and it sometimes paralyzes local councils in this area in the process. We see a slow growth, no growth, smart growth contingent versus a pro-growth, pro-business contingent. How do you as a council member propose to, or prospective council member, propose to heal this rift and move Petaluma forward? How would you seek consensus on policy issues, and in a political environment that some characterize as toxic, some characterize as worse than that? How would you propose to heal this rift that exists, and we know it does, and move the city forward? Somebody grab a mic.
Thank you. I think this is a great question. As a local business owner and someone with quite a bit of experience in planning, both in my educational background, I have a bachelor's and then a master's in integral ecology with a focus in really in planning and processes and policy making. I have really strived to bridge together these issues and focused quite a bit of time and energy on our general plan process prior to being elected to council, focusing on smart growth issues, transit-oriented design, and currently I'm serving on the Association of Bay Area Governments. And this, this organization is really charged with planning processes for the entire 9 Bay region, counties in the region. And what we're tasked with doing is reducing vehicle miles traveled and congestion, and if we can do that successfully, we will be awarded with funding dollars for affordable housing and for transit and transportation projects. So really my focus has been around being able to balance the issues of economic development with the annual growth that occurs within our cities naturally, and being able to focus those energies in projects that will maximize our existing infrastructure and help to improve it by reducing vehicle miles traveled. We can really set ourselves up for the funding that will become available over the next few years. So I do think that it is possible to do, and as long as we focus on projects that will do this, we're poised to be able to bring that funding to Petaluma. We have an amazing downtown that has been built around the concept of smart growth and transit-oriented design, and we've got planning processes around the smart train. By doing this, we are really being able to set ourselves up for success and look forward to being able to protect those funding dollars for us in the future.
I'm definitely one of those people that find politics at times something that can be incredibly unbearable. And what I really want, I think there's so much negativity in our society, and what I'd like to see on City Council and as our representatives and me as your next council member, someone who's willing to have those hard conversations and reach across the aisle. And as I mentioned in our last forum, the greatest experience I have is when someone has a completely different mindset than mine, because that educates me and informs me in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise known, because I was willing to be open and have that dialogue. And I think the bottom line in all of this is that we have to come together as a city council, as a community, and advocate for the community at large. And that's what's most important at the end of the day.
So since I've been on the city council, I think I've have a good track record of doing what the question asks, and that's working with all the members of the city council in a polite and cordial way to get the business of the city done. When you look at the way that we vote on the city council, 95% of the time, it's a complete consensus. We all agree, and there's only a handful of times that there might be an issue that one of us feels strongly one way or the other, and that might be because of our own personal beliefs. It might be because of what you, the constituents, have reached out to us and said. And when it comes to those things, there's a way to be to disagree without being disagreeable or without being rude to the members of the council. And I think I've shown that when it comes to the tough issues in this community, I listen to the different members of the community, I hear what they have to say, I weigh the facts presented to us by the staff, and I make the decision that I think is the best to move this community forward. And I think that a good proof of that is my voting record on the council and my actions since I've been on the council. I've been doing it for the past 18 months, and I ask that you keep me on the city council for the next 4 years to continue to do that work. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about...
Steve, can you repeat the question, please?
No.
All right, I'll just remember it then. I think the question had to do with the divisions between smart growth, business friendly, some of these things. And what I'd first like to say is I think sometimes there's false choices that we're fed. Oftentimes what we hear in the media is there's this dichotomy. You can't be in favor of protecting the quality of life and also be business friendly at the same time. It sort of puts people into different camps. And I think part of it is there's a simplicity in doing that. It makes it easy for people to understand. The reality is that we have a gem in Petaluma, and we do need to adhere to smart growth principles. Not only are there advantages, such as some council members have just said, in terms of getting funding for transit-oriented development projects, but to some extent it's the law. I mean, we have to be reducing emissions. Unless you're not in favor of the Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32, this is something that we need to be working on. So as we're approving projects, we need to be very careful. We need to ask tough questions. It's helpful if you actually have a background in policy and planning so you can look at an environmental impact report document and understand what it means and ensure that we have a tough negotiation with the developers that are wanting to come in and develop. It's only fair, it's our community. At the same time, we need to be open to listening and communicating with everyone because we're not always going to agree. But there's a way to do that diplomatically without, as a colleague just said, being disagreeable. I'm all for that. And my experience in business on an international level has well positioned me for that. I've had to deal with all types of different people with different backgrounds, with different opinions, and I may not always agree, but I can always be agreeable. And that's what we need. We need to be able to foster consensus, and we also need to have a basis of understanding of the complexity of these issues. I think before rubber stamping projects, we need to do our homework. We need to come into planning meetings and actually ask the tough questions and make the tough recommendations, and we can do that politely. Thanks.
All right, we all know about the redevelopment situation here out of Sacramento, the demise of redevelopment departments and a lot of funding. What would be your plan and your priority for handling requirements to do more with less coming out of the state government in Sacramento? I mean, how do you repair the streets, build economic development, maintain schools and parks, protect the public while also witnessing more demands on resources that are not really being helped by Sacramento? Does that make sense?
Who wants to go first?
So yes, we have huge demands on our city, but I think it comes back to I'm running on fiscal responsibility. And what does that mean to me? That means just as we're doing at home, we have to live within our means, basing our budgets on current revenue streams. And I think that's important. And beyond that, again, going back to our economic development, what does that look like? And again, to me, that speaks to increasing our tourism and bringing people to our community, but we do have to have the infrastructure to support that. So I advocate for building hotels and again, supporting jobs that bring head of household wages. Thank you.
Having been challenged by this already and seeing the impacts that redevelopment losses are going to have on our social services here in the city, this year I really put a challenge to our staff and asked for what the real costs are that we've been deferring since this economic crisis. Our deferred maintenance costs on roads, our costs that we haven't been putting aside to be able to replace things like our fire engines. and what the cost will be to organizations like COTS and Petaluma People Services and PEP Housing. So, and the number back was pretty shocking. You know, we're close to a $15 million a year hole over the next 8 years that we don't have an ability to fill at this point. And what I had suggested is that we have a conversation with our community, just in the same way that we're having around the Measure X tax initiative, and really look to the citizens of this city to help us continue to reinvest in our infrastructure costs, because that hole continues to get bigger every year that we don't fill it. So the challenges are huge, and I don't think that we're going to be able to make it without some additional revenues from the citizens, but we continue to strive to bring funding into the city by developing in a very planned and efficient way. Transit-oriented development is really the key to being able to access other funding for our roads and infrastructure. If we cannot do this effectively, the money won't be there for us to access. And so that's going to be very key, as I said before. And then, you know, it's a revenue issue, and so being able to benefit from the economic development that we have put into place will be key. And bringing in new hotels is certainly a big way that we can increase our revenue by probably a couple $1 million a year if we can build the 2 hotels that are currently in planning stages. So there's a lot of opportunity out there in terms of tourism and economic development, but I don't think it will be enough, and eventually we will need to look at other ways to help bridge that gap.
So, tough times. It's a challenge to raise funding, and we have to be very, very creative. The city has made some cuts, and they're not pleasant. It's never good to decrease services such as for police. I was disappointed to see what's happened there. We don't have the officers that we used to have patrolling the streets. We are limited in terms of things like gang prevention. So there's some issues there, and those have an incredible impact on our quality of life. So it's key that we look at new revenues. Now, the city has done some good things. We've done some things for reducing impact fees, as was mentioned before, and I do believe that that's going to bring more business. We've also approved some projects that are going to bring some retail diversity as well as retail dollars. But we need to do more in getting high-paying jobs into Petaluma. We have a business retention, attraction, and expansion program. We need to fully implement that. There are ways that we can think creatively about generating new revenues. For example, we have a garbage franchise contract opportunity that we could renew, and we can negotiate that so it's at not an increase of cost to the ratepayer, but it brings us more revenue that can fix our roads. There are direct impacts from garbage trucks on our roads. Obviously, they're very heavy, so there's a nexus there that makes sense. We need to look at the potential of actually charging for our wastewater. We actually are, I know this sounds funny, but we are treating our wastewater to the extent where it is perfectly safe and is being used currently for irrigation and to water athletic fields, golf courses, for example. But we're actually paying for that to be used. That's a commodity. And if you have someone on the council that really has experience with business like I do, you know that you don't want to leave your money on the table. What you want to do is you want to look at every asset that we have and see what we can do to creatively extract money so it can come right back to our services. So that's an area that I would look at. I would look again at consider raising our transient occupancy tax. I know that it hasn't been popular with some of the hotels, but the reality is increasing that kind of funding goes directly back into marketing that gets more people to go to the hotels. I wouldn't want to put us at a competitive disadvantage with neighboring cities, but when neighboring cities are continuing to raise these taxes and we're not, in a way we're missing an opportunity. Now, in all of these things that involve asking people to pay more, it's difficult. You have to be careful about doing it. So I would turn every stone possible to see if there are more areas in the city that we can save money. We've done a lot of cutting. I don't know that there's much left, but I would turn every stone. Thanks.
So the question was in regards to the loss of the redevelopment agency and where we're not going to have the revenue streams from that to help us with rebuilding and repopulating blighted areas in our community and doing projects like paving our streets and improving the roads and the infrastructure. If you look at the way I've voted since I've been on the council, I've worked to increase the revenue we have coming into the community. When we increase the revenue that we have coming into the community, we have more money to spend to pay for those projects. One of the recent votes that we had was to approve the Deer Creek Center, right? And while some of the candidates will talk about the retail jobs there's other businesses that will be at that shopping center. Doctor's offices, a dialysis center. Currently, we are underserved for dialysis here in this community. I'm sure that one person in this building gets dialysis, and they probably have to drive quite a ways to do it, and that's not acceptable. So instead, we'll have a dialysis center right down the street from us. What's important about my background as an emergency preparedness coordinator with Kaiser Permanente, which I'm sure one or two of you have, my job is to make sure that the doors stay open. And that's what I've been doing since I've been on the city council, is making sure the doors stay open and we're not cutting our services more than we need to in order to balance the budget. And to make sure we have the services that our community members need to thrive in this community. When you're in disaster planning, you have to look at things from a 30,000-foot level and look at the whole picture and not be myopic and only focus on one aspect of a project or a program. That's what I've been doing since I've been on the city council, and that's what I ask you to allow me to keep doing for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Okay, Gabe, my next question actually was about Friedman's and the Target Shopping Center. You sort of covered that. You voted in favor.
So, in my role on the council, I'm also the liaison to the Planning Commission. And so I got to see the project more than once at the Planning Commission level and at the City Council level. The last time we talked about this was at the site plan and architectural review of this project, where we looked at the design of the buildings and how the whole project's gonna look. And we had some concerns from neighbors. 10 different ones were submitted to us. We got all of those 10 requests into the approval, and we approved it on an almost 100% vote. Only one member of the Planning Commission voted against it. And if you look at the Planning Commission, it's not often that we have votes like that. So we were able to come to consensus on that project, on its site plan and architectural review, and move that project forward. And so yes, I'm supportive of Freeman Brothers, I'm supportive of the other businesses like the dialysis center, like the pharmacy, the restaurants, and the fitness center, and the doctor's offices that will be coming to that project, and the jobs that will create. Last time I checked, a doctor might make a head of household wage. I'm not certain though, you might want to look into it. Other people, like nurses that work at the dialysis center, make head of household wages. The other thing too, when we look and we talk about head of household wages, it's kind of insulting to those people that might not make over $20 an hour to say that they're not a head of a household. There's people that live in our community that make under $20 an hour, that pay the same taxes, drive on the same roads, and do the best that they can to thrive in this community. It might mean that both the husband and the wife have to work full-time, but they're able to do it and they're able to provide for their family. And so we do need a good mix of jobs in this community, and we can't reject jobs that will be able to bring in revenue to the community and bring in salaries for those people that don't have them currently. I think that's what's important, and that's why I voted for the project.
Tiffany, can I ask you, you voted against approving Friedman's and the Target Shopping Center, and obviously additional tax revenues are needed. Can small business generate the tax revenue needed in Petaluma?
Well, currently, the information that we were provided in the fiscal and economic assessment analysis was that a good portion of local businesses will be impacted by both of the large retail big box projects. I supported bringing Friedman's to town, and when they were discouraged from participating in the Target project, I encouraged them, keep talking to the developer at Deer Creek. And when the Lowe's project fell through, I encouraged them again, please, connect with the developer at Deer Creek. Let's see if we can make this happen. I think that Friedman's is an important business that Petaluma needs, and it's not one that's going to cannibalize our existing businesses. And so being able to do that is going to be very important for some of that retail sales leakage that we do need. However, I think that project could be different, and one of the main reasons that I voted against it is because I'm on these regional bodies where we're looking at transportation and congestion issues, and my job is to be able to show these agencies that we're doing our best effort to reduce congestion, and that by doing that, we will present ourselves better for the next monies that are become available. And if we continue to approve projects without doing our due diligence to reduce congestion to the greatest extent possible, we are really putting ourselves at a disadvantage for future funding. And so I voted against the project on those bases because it makes my job harder to fight for funding for Petaluma when we haven't done a good enough job in reducing congestion. And I believe that both of those projects could have done much better in terms of the mix that they are providing, as well as how those projects were built. And because of that, they do make my job harder, and I will have to face that and continue to fight for it, and we'll be there to do that if you vote for me for the next 4 years.
Okay, and Alicia, you voted to oppose the Target Shopping Center, but support Friedman's return to Petaluma. While that is the case, you voted against project approvals for the Deer Creek Village Center twice as commissioner.
So the East Washington place, I actually I had to recuse myself from that project because I did sign a petition in 2007, and I was advocating for responsible growth, and that project did not have compliance with our general plan. So again, I did sign a petition and in 2007, so I had to recuse. But yes, Deer Creek Village did come before the Planning Commission, and I represent you. And it came before us as an environmental impact report, and I couldn't support it because we couldn't mitigate multiple issues, which was traffic, downstream flooding, quality of air, and it also, again, it most likely will diminish existing businesses within our community. And again, it did come before us again in the spring, and yes, I was the sole dissent from that vote, because the project did not change. It had stayed exactly the same. Make no mistake, I am highly supportive of Friedman's, I welcome them into our community. But what we had in front of us as a planning commission was a mixed-use project, and what was proposed to the developer was a home improvement store and then a skilled nursing facility. And I think that was a superior alternative. So we have to continue to look at impacts. And again, this project hasn't mitigated downstream flooding. In fact, it's now under the new FEMA flood maps. It's placed directly in that area. So we will have downstream flooding problems. We haven't mitigated any of the traffic impacts. And we have impacts to our air, as well as, again, existing businesses.
And Jason, you said you support Friedman's returning to Petaluma, but you would have preferred an environmentally superior alternative, and I guess that would include a skilled nursing facility?
Yes, I think there was a way...
Explain the environmentally superior.
Yeah, essentially it would have had less retail. So what we could have had as an option with a different council, it wasn't possible with the current majority, but we could have had an option to consider and approve of a project that would have less retail. And it would include a Friedman's as well as a skilled nursing center. We know, and I'm getting there, I'm 45 now, that the aging population is growing. There's going to continue to be demand for these skilled nursing centers. So we need to be looking at those as opportunities for development going forward that there's a big demand for. Those also bring high-paying jobs, and there's also less traffic involved. So I thought that there was merit to that project, but I understand that our current council could not support that. The reality is with two major retail centers approved, and in a market that is still repairing itself, you know, the economy isn't quite back to where it used to be by any stretch. We are going to have a 12% cannibalization rate, which basically means we're going to have a loss of existing retail because we've approved more retail. We've over-approved retail, so it's probably going to be up until 2020, according to the fiscal impact analysis, that we'll have a little bit too much retail. So I think there was an option we could have considered. Now it's done, it's approved, it is what it is, but we need leaders that understand business and understand how to bring companies to Petaluma. And this is a skill that I can employ. I think that when you go into a planning meeting and you have the majority of the planning commission having very big concerns about traffic mitigation because we have a Rainier Crosstown connector that's been promised for many, many years and is still a distant possibility. We're looking at possibly 2020 at the earliest for that to actually get underway. It's difficult for me to fathom approving big projects with more traffic when the mitigations are questionable. So I think what we need on the council are people that are willing to be honest, first of all, with the public and say, Santa Claus isn't coming to town tomorrow to pay for this Rainier Crosstown connector. We're going to have more traffic. And if everyone's okay with it, that's fine, but let's just be honest about that. On the other side, you know, my wife shops at Target. I'm happy to have a Target in town. I was not opposed to Target. I'm not opposed to Freedman's. But again, as we're talking about approving projects, we need to realize there's more complexity. It's not about being for Freedman's or against Freedman's or for Target or, you know, against Target. It's about what these centers represent and what Petaluma represents and the kind of community that we want Petaluma to be. I wasn't in favor of some of the ideas of making exceptions to our sign ordinances, so suddenly we look like Any Town USA. I think that that hurts us. I think we have a brand that we need to protect that feeds right back into tourism as well as our quality of life and bringing more high-paying jobs to Petaluma. So that was my position. Finally, I will say I don't like lawsuits. I've never sued the city. I'm not an advocate of that. But when you have a city council that simply isn't doing their job, they're not asking questions on major projects, they're not negotiating with the developers. I've negotiated with Apple to do licensing deals. I've negotiated with Creative Labs, many large companies. And you can be friendly, you can be nice, you can be agreeable, but you can also be tough. And you can stand up for this town. And if you elect me to the city council, I will stand up for the public interest and all of us, not just the developer interest. Thank you.
All right, here's a question that I think we all know the answer to probably, but I'd like just a short elaboration, if you would. It concerns the Dutra asphalt plant that has been so controversial. If I could ask each candidate, what is your position and why?
Well, it's interesting. It's a great question for me because it was one of the reasons that I got into politics locally. I have always had an interest in politics, but I pursued the technology industry as a career, and I've enjoyed it. But at my time in life, when I've now had 2 children with my wife that are in public school, I need to give back to the community. And when I see things that are happening that are detrimental to this quality of life that we enjoy, I think it's important to stand up. I first went to a Dutra hearing way back when I was teaching my kids to ride their bikes in Schollenberger Park. We really have a gym in Schollenberger Park. And I saw this sign that said, oh, an asphalt plant's going to be coming soon. There was an invitation to come to a council meeting, and I decided to do that. It wasn't the first time I went to a council meeting. The first time actually was when I'd heard they were going to shut down the maternity ward right before we were going to have our first child, our daughter. We didn't know it was a daughter yet, but that's what we ended up with, and we're very happy, of course. But that was at Petaluma Valley Hospital, and our nurse said, wow, you need to go to the city council to stand up on this. So I did. So I started to become cognizant of the fact that when you see something around at your local level, it's not just about state and federal elections. This is where you can make a difference. The Dutra asphalt plant is a really bad idea for Petaluma. It's not only bad for the air quality of environment, it's also bad for business. We have R&M Properties that's across from Schollenberger Park at a time when we need to be attracting more business, fill up our 30% vacancy rate. We don't need to have things that are going to drive customers away. Having a Dutra asphalt plant at our doorstep is an incredibly bad way to invite tourism to town. I'm also a member of the North Bay Rowing Club, so I have an intimate experience in appreciating what it's like to be on that river. And there's some great people working very hard to enhance that. We have river access programs starting with the Petaluma Small Craft Coalition. We have a boat rental center that we're looking at putting into the turning basin, which would be great. It's all part of this great Petaluma Waterways project. These are the things that we need to do to accent the amenities that Petaluma has, not an asphalt plant. And while every one of us is going to say that they support the appeal and they're against the asphalt plant, the reality is that we didn't have to be appealing this. We could have prevented it. There were people that simply didn't show up. They were missing in action at the Board of Supervisors hearings, several of our council members. To Tiffany Renee's credit, she was one of the council members that consistently showed up. I showed up. I took some time out of work to do it. Pamela Torlian, our former mayor, she showed up. David Glass showed up. Teresa Barrett showed up. But we were missing 3 council members, one of whom is running again. I think it's great to support an appeal after the fact, but it's more important for us all to come together and stand up for this town when it's really needed. We could have prevented that vote. I think we could have had an influence. We could have at least tried, but instead, people all signed on to a letter, but we had 3 missing council members. Some of the people up here have been more involved than others. I can tell you that I've been working on this for quite a long time. I've been working to raise funding for this so that it doesn't cost the city money, because it's an important issue for me. And I actually spoke at the county hearings, unlike some of the other candidates. Thanks.
This is a great question. It's something that I have been working very hard on for several years. Since before I was on City Council, I was at our Parks and Rec Commission asking them to weigh in on this issue and send a letter to the Board of Supervisors to discourage that application and approval of the asphalt plant. I got onto council and the issue was still alive and very active, and we had a member of the Board of Supervisors write an opinion piece about the asphalt plant in support of it, and I was really floored. As someone that has asthma, my daughter has asthma, the idea that we would increase our poor air quality right here, right within our own sphere of influence, and not be able to have a say was just astounding. So I wrote a letter that eventually garnered unanimous support from our city council. We sent that letter off, and many of us attended those Board of Supervisors hearings in support of the issues being looked at. And unfortunately, the Board of Supervisors was unwilling to look at the real science around this issue. I recently ran for Congress, and it was a real opportunity for me to have this issue become part of the agenda of this area, because not only is Petaluma looking at an asphalt plant, but also is an asphalt plant being actually just recently approved in Willits, and an expansion in Santa Rosa. And so you've got 3 asphalt plants within 75 miles of each other. What is that going to do to our air quality? And when you look at California's regulations, we are far behind the times in terms of what other states are doing in protecting their residents from these toxins. And so really being able to continue to address this issue with our state and federal leaders to change the regulations and protect us so that we don't have situations like this where a Board of Supervisors can ignore the science, ignore the public, and pass something through with developer support is just astounding to me. So I will want to continue to fight on this issue, and I hope that you will elect me again to continue to fight on this issue. I make no bones about it. This is an appeal process that we can't afford not to do. We have to protect our interests here in the city, and it's not just the health of the people, but it's also our economic interests, as it is the gateway to Petaluma and the Sonoma County area. So I'm a fighter on this. I've got a proven track record, and I hope you'll support me in this election. Thank you.
And I too, at no point have I ever supported an asphalt plant, and I'll for many, many reasons: air quality, our river, our open space. But most importantly, I don't believe that the forefathers of Petaluma and Sonoma County foresaw an asphalt plant at the gateway to this community, and I know I sure as heck don't.
So I have been supportive of the lawsuit since I've been on the city council. The hearings happened before I was on the city council, and while I attended the first committee supervisory meeting in Santa Rosa, I did not attend the second one because I was serving as the chair of the Community Development Committee for the County of Sonoma, representing the second district, which is Petaluma, fighting for funding for homeless services, senior citizen services, and low-income housing for our community. So I apologize that I wasn't at the second meeting, but I have been supportive of the appeal. I have been opposed to the Dutra asphalt plant. So I think, you know, if you look at the way I voted, it has been to support the appeal and to keep fighting that fight. So thank you.
All right, it's almost 8 o'clock. I don't know about you folks, but it's just about my bedtime. So we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody. And again, Sunrise, thank you folks so much. Thank all of you for being here and being so attentive. We appreciate it. My thanks to Mayor David Glass and my producer, Mike DeWald, as always. Ladies and gentlemen, candidate Jason Davies, council member and candidate Tiffany Renee, candidate Alicia K. Harris, and council member and candidate Gabe Kearney. Give them a round of applause. They did great tonight.